Hello and welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to harness innovation to improve contact strategies and drive continuous improvement in your contact center. I am delighted today to be joined by two guests. First and foremost, Martin Teasdale. Martin, you're a dab hand at introductions, shall we say, having your own podcast with Get Out of Rap. I would introduce you, but I think it's only fair if you would like to introduce yourself, if that would be okay.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be on this side. You could have done the whole introduction. It wouldn't have bothered me at all. But yeah, delighted to be here. My name's Martin Teasdale. As you can see there, I set up the team leader community and the Get Out of Rap podcast. My background, I think, probably like a lot of people, is I came into contact centers as a 21-year-old, not expecting to stay. I started as an agent and loved it and stayed, moved to team leader, contact center manager, and I've been in the industry ever since. And it's afforded me the opportunities to work in other countries and, most importantly, just work with some amazing people, including Bev. See what I did there? I did like a little link.
Expertly done. We are also, as you say, joined by Beverley Hughes. Hi, Beverley. Again, whenever anyone's a guest, I always like to prefer to have them introduce themselves. I always think people introduce themselves far better than anyone else can.
Oh, well, I can ruin that for you. So, hi, Sean. Yeah, and hello, Martin. So, thanks very much for inviting me along to this. Gosh, I've worked in and around the contact center industry since Moses was a boy. And in that time, I started out in insurance and then went into outsourcing with a global BPO that's still going. And then I kind of, vacillated between financial services and in-house contact centers and outsourcing again. And then latterly ended up on the CCaaS vendor side in the last 5 or 6 years. So at the moment, I'm working across a variety of projects, some of that supporting CCaaS vendors in their product development and go-to-market, and some industry awareness activities. And so to close the loop on that, that's where Martin comes in, and we talk pretty much daily, and it's a joy to work alongside him.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much both for making the time to talk to us and the audience today. So the first thing, we're going to kind of break this down into a couple of different sections when we talk about customer contact strategy. And the first thing I wanted to touch on actually is, what do we mean when we talk about customer contact strategy? Because for me, it's every mechanism and process that influences how customers are contacted. And we'll be focused on those key areas that affect most contact centers. But I think it's important right up front to say that it's important to consider a holistic approach. Every time that a customer interacts with your business should form part of your customer contact strategy. That's whether you're sending them a letter, whether they're visiting your website, whether they're choosing to interact with you. And it's not just the touch points, it's also the people. And I think that the agents themselves, the users themselves who are interacting with your customers, they're a key point of your customer contact strategy as well. Again, that's my take on it to kind of set a bit of the scene. I'll open it up to yourself, Bev, yourself, Martin. What are your guys' thoughts there?
Well, I think the headline there is making best use of and having an effective contact strategy. There's an awful lot talked about in terms of customer experience and that soup to nuts sort of experience of customers, where they interact with the business. But as you've said, employee well-being is key to that. It underpins the service experience that customers are receiving. And so I think, interestingly, to have Martin sat alongside us in this conversation, this is ostensibly about technological innovation, he's out there doing something that's about the people side of it, and that fully supports the ethos of what Martin's doing.
Thanks, Bev. I think there's a key word there, Sean, that you used, which is holistic. I'm sure there could be people watching who right now work in the contact center in operations, and my background would be it was very rare that you got a seat at the table to consider the whole customer journey. You did your bit and you did it as well as you could, and you were fighting fires and being there for customers, but you very rarely saw the bigger picture. And in some cases, customers were better informed than you. They would talk about the website, the chatbot, whatever it may be, and you'd be thinking, well, we're focused here predominantly on voice. Now, more progressive contact centers include everyone gets a seat at the table when you're dealing with something as important as your customers' journeys. And what does it look like when they are contacting you on different channels and hopping from one channel to the next? Is everybody fully informed around that journey? And are those journeys aligned? I think everyone wants to turn contact centers into customer retention, customer contact, the loyalty, all of those types of things, making your customers really sticky. Well, it starts with making sure internally everyone is aware of what that even looks like to start with. So, that phrase for me is the most salient one about kind of how are you looking at this holistically?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to back up some of what we're saying here, because it's easy, it's easy for us to say, oh, we need to do this and we need to focus on these areas. The 2 points there. We've got a huge amount of wealth of experience within this conversation already, let alone the people who are watching. And I would be very surprised if what we're saying doesn't resonate. But let's back this up with some figures. Our duty of care gap study found that 83% of workers say their work is taking a toll on their mental well-being. Now, we can talk about contact strategy, and we will, in light of the technical improvements you can make. But if you have 83% of your workforce, more than 4/5 of your workforce, who feel like they have their mental well-being is being affected by the work they're doing, it doesn't matter how many contacts you present that user with, it is still going to be a challenge. So I think that just to kind of highlight the challenge that stands there. And I think
sorry, you have to bring it back to that, because the stresses involved in the job from an agent perspective are around doing the best that they can do with the tools that they've got and being empowered to make decisions, to make choices, to drive improvement. And so all of the surveys, the research, for the last 10 years, I was comparing some data that came out just a couple of months ago to a paper that we produced where I was working 7 or 8 years ago. And the same information is surfacing in those surveys. Customers want to get through to organizations quickly. And when they get there, they want accuracy. That's it, speed and accuracy. That's really what it comes down to. The latest Contact Babel research on it shows that clearly. So if right from the get-go, the contact with the advisor, the agent, is an individual, a customer or consumer that is stressed by hanging on for too long or having an arduous IVR journey, whatever, and then when they get through to an agent, that agent has to hand that off to another process. You've already, killed the top two areas of frustration in consumers in customer experience. So no wonder that it's in excess of 80% that agents are, stressed out by what they're dealing with.
I think that's sorry, Sean, go on.
No, please.
I think I have to say I love that we are more aware, focused on this, and it's a topic, because previously people just left, and they were seen as not being able to cut it, and I think when we look at how best to address that, and it ties into the topic of this, kind of like innovation, but I think you look at technology as an enabler, but not just for customer contact, but to think about how can you make the job easier from a mental and cognitive load for your customer-facing team members. So technology, culture or environment, and then the other one is leadership. The extent to which you are working for emotionally intelligent leaders who can spot the signs and intervene and support you, because that number should make us all sit up and go, whoa, we need to do something about this. We talk about, we have a talent attraction problem. I think it's recognized in the industry that we're worried about that kind of new influx of talent, right? And we're losing it to places we shouldn't, let's be honest. And how that we can't work on that at the same time as not do anything about a figure like that, where we say, you know what, the vast majority of people within the contact center doing the job of talking to customers aren't being negatively impacted from a mental health point of view. That should be a real key focus area for us. I think it is, but I think it shows we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you say, 75% of surveyed said they'd be more likely to stay in a customer contact center role long term if their employee implemented mental health practices. And there's historically in previous roles, and I can't speak to the wider industry, but historically in my previous roles, any initiatives like that have been perceived and seen to be fluffy. But I think that there is intrinsic value in that, and the figures suggest that as well. I think to pivot slightly, and we will circle back around to these points that we've touched on, but to pivot slightly, I also want to touch on almost the legacy opinion of customer contact strategies. And I'm thinking about this from an outbound side of things. And I think that there's a legacy historical mentality of you need big data, you collate all of your big data, and then you map and model your demographics, and then that's what you target when you're doing your outbound calling. I'm going to kind of flip that on its head a little bit and put forward that I think since the pandemic and the way in which we now work, even the way in which we ourselves now work, we're working from home, that's then had an impact on contact strategy metrics and the way in which we go about building contact strategy. And I just want to speak to that for a few minutes if we can. Martin, if you want to start us off there.
This is my background, kind of spending time with my team thinking about how can we improve our contact rate, and let's look at the demographics. And I love the fact, if we're talking innovation, I love the fact that we've had this huge disruption that has just wiped our page clean, right? That it said, you know what, everything you thought about, because you'd go, right, let's think. We're more likely to contact people at this point of the day if they're older, because they're going to be at home.
Countdown window.
Yeah, exactly. Or let's avoid EastEnders time, or there's a big match on tonight. If you think about this as well, it's not just the pandemic, it's how people are interacting with entertainment, because we used to schedule times around big TV events. Don't forget it. Netflix, whatever. People are consuming things individually. Our work patterns have changed. Our commuting patterns have changed. Everything about this has changed. And that means that we have to be innovative in how we are thinking, right, well, what's the best way to do this? And that kind of we used to have a run through, so we just let the contacts play out, and then we'd review what we had, as opposed to, I think there's there's a tendency to think to get really detailed around this age group, this location, try it at this time, and we'll get this result. And you have so many different things in play, it's hard to determine what's led to a particular result. So and this kind of suits my mentality anyway, is kind of keep it simple, stupid, right? But I think contacts, I think it's a fascinating topic. And I love the fact that something like this has challenged us, that it's just broken the norm and said, right, because now what we're doing is we're really thinking about our customers. We're really thinking about when is the best time to contact them? How do we do it? And what do we do when we get there? Rather than making quite large, sweeping kind of generalizations, we've had to start thinking. So I think it's great.
I think Martin and I were going for the same audience at the same time back in the mid-2000s with virtually the same product. So we were jointly responsible for people registering on TPS, probably. It's good to see, actually, that outbound is being talked about now in a service context. It's not the dirty word it was for a while, so you're seeing organisations now create more discussion around outbound as an activity to follow up on service incidents. And I think there's still some reticence around that. It's almost we've solved the problem. The inbound inquiry has been rectified, and that's it. Just leave it as is and survey them at the end of that experience, which customers might still be feeling a bit bruised and raw at that point. But if you use that as a tool then to actively follow up and close the loop with those customers and take that information, feed it back into the organisation to learn from, that's kind of common sense, right? Just being able to do that. But times are tight. Perhaps the focus is on just managing the inbound strategy and customer experience to that point. But I'd like to see that move on a stage.
I think there's I agree with you. I think there's a real opportunity, though, for if you think about customers, we all now have a dizzying amount of choice in a very complex world. And too often, aspects of a service are missed. So, and that's where I think there's a real chance for outbound to be making super helpful, super proactive contact and pointing out really key services to people that they might have missed, like kind of like the add-on service, or did you know by having this, you also have access to this, but you might have missed it because guess what? We all have so much going on there's an attention deficit, so that I think there's absolutely still a place. I think it has to be tailored. I think it has to be helpful. And to your point, Bev, joined up and using the fact that we know so much more about our customers now than we ever have. And we can make sure that we're doing something that is adding value rather than being an inconvenience. But there's absolutely a place for it completely.
So so we've identified that the landscape has transformed and has been transformed, both internally in the contact center with people working from home and the hybrid working model that we now see in so many places. In addition to that, we've seen the change in the customer behavior, as you alluded to earlier on, in terms of the way in which we engage with entertainment and so on and so forth. To that end, we're essentially saying that the, quote, old days or the old ways have somewhat been through the ringer and are now more or less unreliable. So what do we do now? What can we do in practical terms today? If we three were running a contact center and we sat down and we said we need to improve our contact rate, what would we do?
I would start off by listening to what's happening on the calls as it is today. That nothing beats being able to glean from what's going on today and validate and corroborate what you think is going on with real evidence. I mean, that has to be the starting point. And back in the day when I was cutting my teeth, you're doing that, it was manual, but of course the systems and the technologies there to automate that and to make that far more effective. So for me, my step one has to be to establish what I think is going on. Is that really what's going on in the contact?
Yeah, absolutely. Before we come to Martin, I just want to remind everyone there is a Q&A section at the end. You can use the chat in the bottom bar of the presentation of the webinar in order to put your questions forward, and we will be coming to those at the end. Sorry, I just had to break in with that little one. Martin, to yourself on what Bev's just said.
I think I totally agree with Bev. I would add include everyone. So all of the people in your operation, specifically those engaging with customers or monitoring. So from a QA point of view, too often that is an overlooked resource of information. So they're very rarely asked for opinions, because what you're basically saying is, right, guys, everybody, here's our challenge. The challenge is to improve our contact rate. What do you think? What are we seeing right now? Because I think we've never had as much access to data, to insight, to business intelligence, and those absolutely can help guide where we might try something. But I think also, again, horrible phrase, and if it's like a phrase bingo, right? But again, it's a seat at the table for everyone. So this is something where utilizing your team and involving them and their thoughts in how might we do things better will make a massive difference. That's where I would start, including, getting access to all the data. What do we know right now? Let's get everyone on this, because too often I think we work in silos and go, I think this will work. And you've got other people that might actually be doing it going, why are we doing this? If you'd have asked me, I'd have told you this wouldn't have worked. No, let's ask them.
I think it's, sorry.
Please.
No, I think it's vital to address the fundamentals in the business before you start looking at the fancy stuff. And when I was thinking about how to make that come alive, it just goes back to something that Martin said the other day when we were discussing innovation, and I'm dancing around the acronym, the 2-letter acronym that is on the tip of everyone's tongue. I'm not going to say it. But you referred to something called senior management FOMO, Martin. Can you recall that conversation? There is a real energy and drive behind technological innovation at the moment, but hold your horses and get the basics right before going down that path. Otherwise, all you're doing is just automating and industrializing a problem, just going to kind of make it viral.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a danger that we will pursue. I couldn't agree. You're saddling up people. You could just throw on another bit of kit, and they're like, "Look, it's hard enough just to log in right now, and you're now giving me something else." So I think technology is an enabler. It's never been better, and it's a big plus point for our industry. And again, in terms of attracting talent, come and work and see cutting edge technology live right now. However, where it's placed, if you don't have the fundamentals right, you're kind of you could potentially make things worse rather than better.
I think the additional, there's two parts to kind of what I want to mention here. And the first one is around the nature of how we approach making an improvement to something. And I think that given that this is unknown territory, I think we have to approach this in a combination of almost a scientific mechanism, but also a little bit of an experimental fashion. So what are the metrics that matter to us? Okay, what are the levers we have available to us to pull and tweak? Let's tweak and pull some of those and see how those KPIs and metrics react. And I think to sit there and do a big giant model over the past, 24 months and build that and analyze that to the nth degree, whether you use the 2-letter dirty word acronym or whether we have someone sitting doing that as a full-time job, I feel like where we are right now in the industry is if you do that and that takes you 2 weeks to do, you then implement it, you've got such a huge lead time on actually seeing whether what you're doing is making a difference. And it means that by the time it gets to there, we're in such a dynamic environment that actually may have changed. Some other factor may have come in. And I feel like getting as short a feedback loop as possible, getting that feedback directly from the users, from the different departments, from quality, from management, from everybody that you have available to you, validating that feedback with the data to back it up as quickly as possible, and then saying, I'm going to make a change and see what happens. And off the back of that, I want to touch on something Martin mentioned earlier on, and that's around making improvements. I think there's something to be said for making minor improvements that accrue. Martin, I'll come to you for your thoughts on that one.
I think this is one of my favorite analogies from a sporting world that I've applied to work before, and that was I'm not a huge fan of cycling, but I love this story around the impact that Dave Brailsford had on the Sky cycling team, and he focused on a phrase I think we've probably all heard about, marginal gains. But if you actually look into that, now he's considered innovative, right? But actually, it was him and his team, not actually, like it's different, but him and his team focused on everything. So how they traveled, what they did, what they wore, tiny things that you would think might not make a difference. To the one that always sticks with me is they took on the Tour de France, they took their own mattresses to each hotel with them because they knew that sleeping well in between an arduous event that happens every day makes a massive difference to their cyclists. Now, if you look at that and go, do you think it makes you 1% better than your opponent? You go, yeah, okay, great. Well, that 1% added to the fact that we've got new cycling shoes that we think are slightly lighter and comfier, that's another %. And it's this kind of don't think that innovation has to be huge, grandiose inventions, massive changes. It can be something quite simple. It can be, well, actually, if you don't have to go to this page to log on, you just go here. Bang, you've saved everybody 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Well, okay, let's log that. That's one. Where else can we find other things? And that kind of, the devil is in the detail, isn't it? So those types of things, I think we can undertake now. I used to ask my teams, look, we can do things that are no cost or low cost, but they just take a bit of effort. So let's try and find some things now that we can implement that our team might be aware of. Show me how you log in. Right, okay, let's do this. And those types of things make a huge difference.
And Bev, to come to you on this one, I mean, to piggyback on what Martin's just outlined, I guess within a contact center, if you went to one individual and you said, I need you to improve X by 10%, I know I would have found that quite daunting. Whereas actually, if you can go to, say, 10 different people and say, I want you guys to help improve this by 1% each and collate that improvement, that feels more achievable. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, everything about improvements is about consistent application, isn't it? For anyone who's on a weight loss journey or a fitness journey or whatever, consistency and small gains is what it's about. So you can just apply that in a business context and contact center. And also it's just, it's more rewarding, isn't it? To have 3 days where you made 1% improvement and maybe on day 4 you didn't, than to be shooting all month for a 10% improvement and then finding you get to the end of the month you didn't achieve that. So psychologically, it's just a good management technique to bring people along with you in small incremental wins.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I really liked the analogy that you put forward then, Martin, and it kind of triggered a few things in terms of just as I was thinking about it, and there are so many different aspects to contact strategy. And I think that the last point I want to put onto this before we move on to our third topic is that I think that there's an upper limit when it comes to contact strategy. And I know that sounds really counterintuitive, but let me just posit that if every single outbound call, if every single outbound contact that the business attempted was the right party and was a decision maker and was in a position to have a full and complete conversation, I would put it forward that you probably wouldn't get through all of your data.
Yeah.
And so the secondary part of that is actually sometimes for users having shorter, oh, it's the wrong number or whatever the case may be, is important for the users as well, because otherwise they're hurtling from one really extensive, intensive conversation to the next. And so I think that you have to consider that around what your contact strategy and what your expectations are. And I think you need to manage your expectations as a business. Again, is that fair? Am I off the mark on that?
I think you're right, and it's interesting because you've just reminded me. I made an effort with my teams, anyone that was within my outbound world, that we didn't use we didn't use the word data, because we coined, we had data haters who said performance was based on the data all the time. So it was important that, of course, we used it in our vernacular, right? But it was important to me that we reminded people these are customers like me and you. That's what we're talking about here. So we're putting all our efforts in to deliver them to you. Please, when they arrive, let's be present, let's be ready, and really maximize the fact that there is another human being right there, ready to talk to you, and kind of personalize it rather than make it too analytical. But I think the other thing that you're spot on about is, again, this cognitive load, right? Which is it is not okay to think, right, well, if we can just deliver, as an ex outbound agent myself who was committed, I wanted to progress, I had a great team leader, I loved the environment I was in, I still reached points in my shift where I was like, oh God, I was looking at my next break is not for another hour. I really hope I just get a few answer machines and that there's no one there, because I'm not ready to be at my best right now. And I think understanding that is happening right now, you go, okay, so what can we do? Well, I love outbound because you have the beauty to go, right, everybody stop. We'll stop activity. We're going to take you off the phones. We're going to have a huddle. We're going to have a conversation. We're just going to just exhale. Okay, are we ready? Are we ready to get back in the fight? Let's do it. You've got to be utilizing that power that you have, because not everyone was as committed as me, and you could just see the body language as well. You could just see people kind of like, God,
yeah,
I've got to do another one. So I completely agree with you on that. Completely.
To flip that into the inbound environment, if inbound agents are handling call after call of a similar nature, maybe complaints, customer care, there's a lot you can do around the IVR to make that presentation of the caller to the live agent more acceptable. And I've talked about this before, but I think it was my bank, not going to name them, but there was a period of time post-COVID but a period of time where they were still handling excess volumes. But they had inserted messaging that was just very human, very considered around handing off from the IVR to the agent. Please be aware, our agent's dealing with massive volumes or whatever. They might not have the right news for you, or the news that you want to hear, but don't shoot the messenger effectively. And if more organisations took that approach to softening that journey, because nobody likes to be sat in an IVR. And I've also said about this before, my water company doesn't have an IVR at all. Very old school. You just get straight through within 3 rings to somebody who triages the call. Amazing. I love it. I wish I could buy more things from them.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think you've touched on a really important point there, which is around for many companies out there, it's like technology has evolved to be a way to redirect customers. And we have this many different ways for customers to get in touch with a business. And I always feel like it should be meeting the customer on their terms where they are at that point in time, whether that's web chat, whether that's SMS, whether that's WhatsApp, whether that's a call, whether that's an email. However, it does feel like there's this trend towards digital deflection and actually making it difficult for customers to be able to get in touch.
Absolutely. You talk about it in terms of meeting the customer where they're at. We used to talk about this as this was opening up choice to customers, that they're, fantastic. If they want to text us, they'll text us. If they want to Facebook Messenger us, they'll do it that way. What's happened is that by opening the floodgates to those channels, businesses have just decided which are the most cost-effective channels for them to go down. And then they've pointed us all down that route. And little old customer who actually, has maybe a mixture of preferences is shunted into this hopper. And then when they battle through it, and eventually after maybe an unsatisfactory web chat or a digital journey, when they battle through it and finally get through to a living, breathing agent, and of course they're hacked off.
I think there's something as well around, I covered some stats the other day. If the outcome is this, so customers were asked, a couple of thousand of them were asked, if the outcome is the same, do you prefer to not engage with a human, so self-serve, whatever the channel may be, or deal with a human being? And regardless of age, the average was 70% said, or round about 70%, can't remember the exact number, but they wanted to still said, I'll deal with a human, thanks. And, I think we very quickly kind of we're kind of trying to revert to a norm. There was a real sense during the pandemic that we all felt, even though we were remote, that we all felt connected to each other. So contact centers were reporting customers were giving them more time. There was a real sense of, hey, we're in this together. We just appreciate the fact that you are still working, delivering the service. Now that is based on connection, so when you're thinking about your strategies and and things like that, lead with human connection. So give your agents, customer-facing team members, the autonomy to deliver themselves as human beings, as people, and get that connection with customers when you make contact with them. Because we know, despite all the channels of choice, that stat is really powerful. Given if the outcome's the same, what do you want to do? Do you want to do it yourself, just on the screen, or do you want to speak to someone? They want to speak to someone. So we still can kind of lean into that, and we can still recreate that sense of connection we all had with each other. Whereas if you're officious and you are not recognizing where people are at when you're making contact with them, you're more likely to rub them up the wrong way.
I agree. And it actually opens up. So we're moving into our QA section, but this directly links to a question that we've had come in. I promise this isn't kind of predetermined. This is just serendipitous. But the question is, on the topic of innovation, how do you ensure your staff and customers can keep up with the change? Can too much change be a bad thing?
A great question, right? Because you mentioned, we were talking earlier around trying to deliver the best contact strategy, right? And it's the same sort of thing. If you do too much, you can't determine what's working or not. So you can have great ideas, but then you need to kind of prioritize them and say which ones, what order, and how long are we going to give each one to try and implement to see what the outcome is. And I think the same is true of dizzyingly paced change over a long period can be exhausting, and I think there isn't, let's be honest, a lot of us, we are in this industry because we're kind of addicted to the chaos. We're kind of addicted to every day you're coming in and you're flying by the seat of your pants. That's great. But you also need people in the team that are methodical and ordered and can say, hey, Martin, just visit planet Earth for a second. I just need to tell you about these things that are on our kind of change plan. And you're like, yeah, brilliant. And you're off again. So I completely agree that kind of the pace of change needs to be managed.
Yeah.
Would you agree that you need to have a clear objective of why the change is being made and have that front and center as well? Not to target that too closely, but I feel like that's an important point to make as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's got to be led from the top in terms of what the objective is for the business, but keep that communication two-way, test in small ways, test and learn. It's kind of like going back to your science lessons at school, right? You just had to have your methodology right and test one thing against another and see what the results are.
Yes, absolutely.
100%. A very, very specific, clear outcome. This is what we are aiming for. Here's how we plan on doing it. Now you can go. Release it.
And if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to kind of remove it or review it or rescind it or retract it. I think it's difficult, particularly in the industry. It can be easy to become entrenched in being so committed to a change that you implement it no matter what. And actually, if it's not delivering the output that you needed it to deliver, especially if it's a detriment either to your customer, process, or your staff, that needs to be looked at as soon as possible. Conscious of time, I think we've got time for one more question. In the context of a debt collection contact centre, what contact strategies can be implemented to strike the delicate balance between effective debt recovery, maintaining ethical practices, considering financial circumstances, and the mental well-being of debtors? That is a big question to close on.
It is. A lot of my background was in debt collection, so I love that question because I think you have to recognise that the customer is probably fearful of contact. So you if you can, whether it is with another choice like a text or WhatsApp or something that can remove the fear of the contact. So that the contact is not about admonishment, but the contact is about problem solving together with the customer. However you can get that early with the customer, the better, because the moment you could remove the emotion and the fear and say, hey, listen, we're here to help. I've got a number of tools that you weren't even aware of that I can apply. I just need you to engage with me. So whether that is front and center of the contact when you make it, or whether there's some means to let the customer know when contact happens, that is what is going to happen. So you're removing the fear of the unknown. You're removing the fear of this being some kind of punitive contact rather than a problem-solving contact. That was very much, we'd be straight in with, we are here to help. We've got tools. I just need to talk to you. I just need to take you through this process. I assure you it's painless. And at the end of it, you'll feel relieved. so you are signposting, but you're very, very clearly getting in that it's based on a positive solution for you and for the customer. And I think we've got more means now than ever to be able to do that.
100%. I can't improve on that answer.
Awesome. And that, unfortunately, means that we have, in fact, run out of our time that we had aside for our QA session today. All that's left for me is to say a huge, huge thank you to Beverley Hughes, Martin Teasdale from Get Out of Rap. Thank you both ever so much. Thank you, everybody who has joined our webinar today. For any questions that were raised as part of the QA session that unfortunately I didn't get a chance to unpack with our guests, we will be following that up after the fact, and we will make sure that the people who ask the questions receive that afterwards. The recording of this webinar will be available, and we'll be sharing that through the usual channels as well. In that case, thank you very much, both. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Bev.
See you, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.